and welcome to this week's episode of Hashtag Leadership What's on Your Mind, a podcast to make you stop and think about your leadership journey by bringing some great inspirational stories from business and experts in their field. Today we're speaking to Rory Underwood. Rory, how are you doing? You okay?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Yes, not too bad, thanks. Rory Underwood, England international, RAF Pilot, so there's a bit of a link there with my background. We've got 20 minutes to discuss your experience in all the things that you've done around leadership and share your stories and pass forward some knowledge and information for our audience. So, Rory, just introduce yourself with regards to what you're doing right now and tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Well, currently I've been running a business for 12 years called Wingman, performance consultancy. Been running that since pretty much just after the crash. I set up another company after I left the military. So the main two parts of a business is helping managers of all different levels and leaders through some development programs. So it's more of the training side of leadership and management. And the other side of the business is going to the business and actually looking at performance in the whole context of how do you get individuals and teams and other teams in the business all working more effectively and efficiently with each other. So very much, from my background from the military, from high level sport, as well as the last 20 years having been a consultant in all various types of businesses, bringing all those things together to try and help companies grow. And I suppose at the moment the main concentration is really helping that growth area, because companies, when they grow, those are sort of things that they tend to miss, forget, don't know anything about, and that's where I'm trying to help them.
Yeah, and that's one of the great reasons I brought you on as well, because I'm really passionate about the transferable skills. From obviously my experience in the military, you've got that as well. Obviously, talking about the link between high performance and leadership in self and others as well. So let's start with the question that we ask everybody. Are you aware, whether it's conscious or on reflection, about where your personal leadership journey started?
I'll have to guess, and it was a guess because you asked me the question a while ago. It was at school, and when I wanted to be a pilot, I joined the CCF at school. So it's a combined cadet force up in Barnard Castle, up in County Durham. And I joined the Air Force section of that. And obviously, as part of what you do with the cadets is on your afternoons doing your cadet stuff is both sort of a bit of theory and knowledge about the Air Force, as well as doing exercises, and some of that is practical leadership tasks. And I really love the problem solving side of it. And obviously then, whenever you're getting the task yourself to lead a task, the challenge of that. And obviously that went through very quickly towards me trying to get into the Air Force after I left school. So that to me, because I never really had any sports, I was never captain during my school years. But then I was made house captain for my last 2 years at school. So one of the houses I was was it house captain? Or, yeah, I wasn't head boy, so I was captain of the house. Yeah, so that was it. That's such a long time ago.
Right. Excellent. So let's go into your professional sport first and performing at a high level.
I wasn't a professional sportsman.
Oh, yes, sorry. I remember the years crossing over there. Your international career and your high level sport then, and performing at a high level. Talk to me a little bit about your experience in leadership in that environment and what you saw from others, what you took from others, what you gave to others, and how you were able to perform at that level.
For me, from the rugby perspective, and especially at international level, the two things that always stood out for me is just one is that clarity of direction, just the head coach or the team manager that came in, and how he very much articulated the vision that he had for the way the team wanted to play and how he wanted to get the best players to do it. And then seeing that being done in the same way as his empathy and understanding how to communicate and relate to different types of players in a squad. Because, it's the proverbial rugby union is made of all different shapes and sizes, and you could argue personalities as well. So a combination of those two things, how do you get the balance of the ones who want to go out there and knock somebody into next week, and somebody wants rather to run round and score a try, and all the different personalities you have in a squad. And when you're playing at that highest level, when you have a squad where only 15 players can take the pitch, and you've got a handful of other players in the squad who don't get as many games, how do you manage the expectations of all that as well? And so I remember seeing that during the times from the late 80s during the 90s, when England went through very average years in the 80s to then being more successful in the 90s. You know, Jeff Cook was somebody I very much saw and admired as a team manager.
Awesome. Yeah, and just quickly going back to, I talk about the self responsibility of leadership and getting yourself to that level. What are the sort of things that you were doing to make yourself get to that elite level?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds very similar to, I mean, I've always regaled my stories to people in the civilian world that talk about, for us in the military, and you'll resonate with this big time, it's about self-discipline. People talk about discipline, and they always think of the military as being, you're told what to do and you do as you're told. And trying to explain to people, it's so far from the truth. And it's very much about how, as each part and each cog of a team or machine that's going on, each of us know the part we play. And it's our response to make sure that we prepare ourselves and do it. And, you know, it doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes you can't do it. But what frustrates me is that people just tend to go, oh, well, that's fine, I can't do it. But they don't tell them, don't tell somebody else, you know. And so there's a whole aspect of that self-discipline that comes into it. And, you know, a lot of that ends up being, I think, as most people know, the higher you get, the tougher it gets. Those that have that drive and ambition and resilience and resolute desire to get somewhere, it tends to be slightly easier for these people.
Yeah, awesome. And again, that's great self-awareness and building those layers of responsibility.
And the difficulty there is, you know, not everybody has got great self-awareness. And I'd say probably in my early stages, I wasn't aware of that. I just did it naturally. Some people do, some people don't. I just loved playing the game. I just wanted to go, you know, I was good at it, but, you know, there's a constant, was I physically, mentally, deliberately thinking about it? Not necessarily, but, you know, at the time of trying to play rugby at the highest level and trying to go through flying training, there's obviously something in there because you've got two difficult type of activities you're trying to do. And it doesn't come around if you're just going, oh, I'll give that a go, see how that goes, see what happens.
Yeah. And again, like, it's that when you were just saying that, it reminded me about when people say about flow, about when people go back to sort of the child state of just enjoying playing rugby or enjoying doing something, and you're just in natural flow.
Well, it's like anything else, you know, flow or zone, if that's what you're talking about. You know, when people get into that area where it just seems to just happen naturally. And of course, when it does that, then success tends to come. And of course, when you get success, it tends to be enjoyable. So it's not just about enjoyment for enjoyment's sake, although there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And that's, you know, especially to young kids starting out playing rugby, you know, enjoy it. Don't just do it because it's a flogging, you know, a dead horse. Do it because you enjoy it. And obviously when you enjoy it, you'll enjoy doing more of the skill sets to make yourself improve. And so you get to that cycle.
Yeah. Awesome. So you mentioned about the RAF and the pilot training and stuff. Was there tell me about some of the similarities, but also some of the differences that you saw between those two very similar but different environments you were coming up through?
Well, specifically it's different, obviously, but there's a huge amount of similarities. I mean, in the context of flying, it's obviously, to begin with, when you go flying training, it's very singular. It's very much about you trying to overcome the challenges of learning how to fly the aircraft, a new aircraft, how to operate it, how to fly that aircraft in a combat situation. In some ways, that sounds very similar to what you do in rugby, but you spend a lot of time in rugby working in a team context. So once you get the basics sorted out, then you go and apply all the sort of team stuff you expect to fly in a flying sense. So you're flying formation with other people, flying at low level in pairs or fours, and you have to work as a team. So you know, the level of desire to achieve the target, the collective responsibility that goes with it, the desire to learn from all your mistakes, all those sort of things are very similar in both cases.
Yeah, it's I talk about quite a lot about you've got to create that environment that allows all those things to happen.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
So just from your, what were the great leaders doing? Probably on reflection now from the time you had in the military and in rugby, what were some of the things that the great leaders that you had in your journey doing really well that you now look back and then pass that forward?
Well, yeah. Well, I mentioned earlier on Jeff Cook. I mean, for me, he's the success that England are enjoying in the last 20, 30 years. It all started with him, because even though England won the Grand Slam in 81, they won the wooden spoon in 1983. I joined the England team in 84. And it went through a bit of wilderness years. There was no real, professional thinking. So it wasn't professional, but it was professional thinking was brought until Jeff came. And really, with him and combined with Will Carling as a young captain who was very forward thinking, that really turned everything around. And so the success I see now is from that, and from what I said about him, his ability to create a clearer picture and direction we wanted to go in, consistency in what he wanted with regards to the players. So selection was an issue. I mean, 1 year, I remember the 2 years before Jeff came in, I think we had 50 players played for England in one season. Right. 1 year for the tour and the Five Nations in those days. And when you think about his ability, and you think about people who've been my bosses on squadrons as I've been through my career, those are the ones that, with both Jeff and with squadron bosses, who are able to provide an environment where it's challenging, the desire to be the best you can be and to keep improving, whilst at the same time making it as enjoyable as possible and as inclusive as possible, such that it's not a dog-eat-dog environment. It's very much about how can we help each other to be better as a squadron or as a rugby team. And those are the ones, especially as you expect in a team environment, engender a much more collective desire to improve.
Yeah, awesome. So looking into now what you're doing now, talk to us about some of the things that you see on a regular basis that are sort of marginal gains for people and teams outside of those environments of sport and
well, outside of sport, I mean, it's, to be honest with you, there are marginal gains, but there are massive gains. The interesting thing is that out in the business world, you think about it, your time in the military, when I was flying, when I was playing rugby at the highest level, we probably spent 90% of our time training, preparing and planning to go and do. So it's 90% of the time 10% doing. In the business world, you could flip-flop that around. Mm-hmm. So they spend 10% of the time training, 9% of the time doing. And of that 90%, I normally advocate, that 10%, 9% is probably training, but that's probably training that you have to do from a legally compliance necessity for the job type room. But there's still the numbers of people I come across who are in jobs that aren't really fully trained to do that job. They've been promised training, but it's never happened. And only 1% is actually development training of actually how do we develop our leaders of the future? How do we make our people better for the future when we are bigger or coming under economic type challenges? And so what you tend to find is that across business, the amount of investment, time and resource put into people to develop them for the future is woefully lacking. There are people out there that do, but it's most interesting how, some people tell me that they spend lots of money on training, but when you break it down, look at what training they're actually doing, it's because they have to, and there's not much development work going. And so there's a massive, people think, I'm not saying you have to do 90% training, but, when I do hear companies saying that we want to be a world-class organization, the All Blacks don't become the number one team for 90% of the last 20, 30 years just because they turn up and play. Yeah, they spend a long time training, planning, preparing, working out, succession planning, the whole works. And that's the reason why they're number one. And of course, they create the right environment. Everybody talks about the culture within the All Blacks team. And that's what Eddie Jones is trying to do with England. And all the teams are trying to do that. But in a business context, there's two main themes I can sort of talk about. One is the inability, and I said to you before about leaders creating that clarity of direction. I come across a lot of business owners and leaders who say that they communicate the vision all the time. But it's one thing communicating it, there's one thing for people to understand, and then what to do about it. So how you communicate your vision, your strategy, your business plan, whatever it is, how do you cascade that down through the organization of yours, such that each level fully understands in general what it's about, what part they play, and what they've got to do, and with whom. And that comes to the second point, where cross-functionally across organizations, the ability and relationships of teams and departments, etc., across businesses is really poor. Across 20 years, it's, you know, as an average, it is poor across the organization. And so how does the leadership, how do the different levels of management down through organization ensure that cross-functionally there are quality relationships and that people know how they work with each other? So if you get the strategic priorities clarified down through the organization, as well as get very good cross-functional relationships, then you start hitting the sweet spot about how you get the best understanding of what we do and how we do it.
One of the things that I identified quite quickly after the first 12 months of being out the military was that everybody seems to be busy being busy, and there's lots of lack of focus and direction. So what have you seen with companies that are doing that really well and making that transition, like you said, not to the 90%, but going towards that way? What are they doing to create that time?
Well, they're much better at things. They are all focusing. They're also focusing 100 things, and of course they're not doing quality focus. The real challenge is goes back to, if you clarify the strategic priorities, people will understand what they need to focus on. You create the right environment, people will be much more innovative and adaptable and agile to be able to work together to try and solve all the solutions. So, you know, it's one of my favorite sayings is and the reason why people don't do that is because it means a bit of training, means a bit of time off, means a bit of time having a meetings, it means a bit of time to discuss things. And of course, the last thing we want to do is taking the time off because we are all running around being busy. So it's that age-old, you know, short-term pain for a long-term gain. But most people prefer that short-term gain. And of course, all it does is everything builds up to that long-term pain.
Yeah, excellent. So what are some of the things? We've only got like 3 minutes left. It flies by, these 20 minutes, but it's good to get the good stuff. So what are some of the things that you really, people listening to this podcast are at different like ladders, different areas of their leadership journey? What would you tell people to invest in or to make that next couple of steps forward, whatever level they're at?
I think it's very difficult to do it on yourself. I think you need to find some people that you can trust and rely on, that you can discuss things. In the last 20 years or so, I've just got into cycling, typical mammal, around the Vale of Beaver. And I go cycling with a mate of mine from the village. We've known each other, kids are at school together, and he's been a very senior executive in the retail world, big FTSE company. And so the ability to go off and just discuss life in general, about his challenges, about my challenges, it's really good to have somebody you can bat ideas and thoughts and things off and try and assess whether what you're doing is right or wrong, or could you do it better, or how do you want to tackle things. It's always useful. There are some people who can do it all themselves, but there are not many of them. I suspect most people will always have somebody else that they can rely and fall back on.
Yeah, and again, I talk about this, about the coaching process, and it's a conversation, and it's outside of your bubble. And I talk about my inner circle. I've got 2 or 3 or 4 inner circles, and I can be working on my business, thinking everything's great, I'm getting everything right, and then I go and ask for feedback from 2 or 3 circles out, and they're going, "Sure, I don't get that." And what do you mean? And internally, you're like, "Oh no, like what am I doing?" But it's that using that process of external, non-biased, just talk out loud.
Yeah, it can be whatever. It doesn't have to be anything formal. I mean, the thing I have with my mate is it's nothing formal. We don't actually. It's not called coaching. It's not called mentoring. It's nothing. Yeah. It is just 2 middle-aged guys being grumpy on a cycle. But we chew the fat about the world in general. You know, we're sorting out world peace and everything else that's going on, plus all the challenges we have. And it's just the ability to, as you say, have a conversation. But it's nothing formal.
Yeah, and it's about finding that right person, isn't it? And
yeah.
Person might be right in front of you, or it's the obviously the more you go towards somebody that's got the skills and the abilities and the knowledge, that's more towards getting a mentor and actually getting a proper process in place. Yeah. But it can be really powerful. You can do it for free. Just start to talk to somebody who's not in your bubble.
Yeah.
Awesome, excellent. So you just remind me of a quick story, actually. When I first started doing coaching, there was a guy who I thought got it all sorted. He had 4 or 5 businesses, and I just offered a bit of coaching and thought, can I have half an hour with you? And he spurted out all about his businesses, and I asked a couple of questions at the end, and he left, and he was like, Stu, that was amazing. And I've kept in contact with him. And what he said was exactly what we were just talking about. He always talked to his shareholders, his family, his employees, and the fact that I was none of them, and I was actively listening and not just nodding my head going, yeah, that sounds great, really good, being the yes people that sometimes people are surrounded by. So that's us. I'm just going to stop the buzzer because sometimes I struggle to stop the buzzer. That's 2 seconds to go. Rory, thank you so much for your time today. I know that's going to be really useful for the people watching and listening.
Pleasure.
So thank you so much. Guys, if you enjoyed that and you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you hit subscribe and hit the bell button to get any every Wednesday a new episode comes out. If you're listening to us on your podcast provider, please follow us and write us a review and share your takeaways from this episode in the comments below. I'll tag Rory's links below as well, so you can go and check out his current organisation, his company, and go and check him out as well. So that leaves me to say, Rory, thank you so much again. And
thank you very much.
See everybody next week. Take care. Bye.